Good morning, ATF team. Dr. J here, coming to you with an ATF breakout, and welcome to week 1B. This is a continuation of the first week. I know many of you were still getting your paperwork and materials in, as well as waiting for your functional screening. And so at this point in time, I believe that everybody that has submitted paperwork and submitted photos should have received their functional screenings at this point in time. And also, if you ordered an ATF pack, I believe Lynn has gotten those in your hands, and you should be ready to start. So here's what we're going to talk about again in week 1B and that continuation of week 1A. We have to talk about mobility. Remember, the four components of functional fitness is mobility, stability, strength, and then dynamic movement or functional movement. So starting with the mobility piece, what we're effectively talking about is we're talking again about the elasticity of the muscles, or how elastic or flexible are the muscles and tendons, and then the next part is fascia. We do not manipulate other soft tissues like the ligaments and the cartilage and things like that. We're predominantly talking about fascia, and we're talking about musculoskeletal or musculotendinous tissues. So I thought we might do just a little bit of an anatomy lesson so you'd understand. If you looked at your functional screenings, you will notice that we had a high number of those of you that were U1s, which is an upper extremity dysfunction, mostly with your heads forward or your shoulders rounded. We had a lot of L1s and C1s as well. So lower extremity 1, where what we saw with that was either during the postural screen or during the movement screen, we saw your feet turn outward, or the big thing with most of you actually was that your heels lift up. Again, as we notice the photos, while some of you did take your boots off, many of you left them on, but even with your boots on, we noticed that we had a lot of heel lifts. So as you did your overhead squat, your heels lifted up off the ground in order for you to gain that motion. And that is a telltale indicator that you are extremely tight in your calf, and then again in their plantar fascia, which means we're going to have a lot of folks who are going to be have a propensity for foot pain, possibly even flat foot, lateral knee pain, and then in the reality of the situation is that's going to carry right up to the back and the core. And we had, again, another high number of you who had either a core 1 dysfunction, or we did actually see a lot of the C2R, which is that asymmetric shift to the right, which was kind of interesting. But nonetheless, we're seeing that kinetic chain working. And I thought what we might do real quick is just a real quick anatomy lesson. I know a lot of you are thinking back to either high school or college and going, why in the heck do I want to sit here and listen to an anatomy lesson? But if you understand why it is that you're having maybe some of the discomfort that you're having, or why you are categorized the way you are, and thus why we're going to choose certain exercises for you, maybe this will help you better understand. So we're looking at two different pictures. We're looking at the back side or the lateral side of the human musculoskeletal system, and we're looking at specifically here's the thoracolumbar fascia, but not to ignore this other fascia. So we're looking at this kind of white gristly material here on the body, and this is extremely important because fascia, while it's rather restrictive and doesn't have a ton of elastic properties, does have some elastic and contractile properties, so it does facilitate and or hinder muscle. And here we are again on the front side. Again, you'll see this thick gristly parts here. This is that connective tissue and fascia. And then you're going to notice here that these are some lines. These are effectively lines of pull, or how the body works. You know, again, we have these arcing structures, and we have these diagonal structures here. And again, here you'll see this. So, you know, our body's working on diagonals, and that the orientation or the striations in the muscles take on different angles, and that determines ultimately the function. That's the way they'll pull. That's their line of pull in those pulley systems. And these are really important because really the way this fascia works and the way mobility works and is that we really, it's three-dimensional, and that it works on all planes. It works, you know, front to back, side to side, and diagonally, or twists horizontally. And that's really how the body works. So again, many of you were tight in through here, tight through the calf, okay, which then works its way up. What that's going to do is that's going to turn or rotate the lower leg or the tibia, which then changes the orientation of the femur and the hip, which puts a stress and strain or tightens on this IT band. Now this can be a chicken or the egg situation where Perhaps the issue truly was at the back first, and then transferred into the lower chain or transferred into the leg or lower extremity, thus creating the tightness in the lateral leg, in the lateral posterior hamstring right here, and then transferring down to the foot. For us, it really doesn't matter. We need to fix the entire chain. We don't just fix one part. And again, that's why many of you are seeing that you are U1, C1, L1, meaning you've worked that entire chain. So over time, that entire chain has become dysfunctional, and we're going to work it both ways. Again, if you can't do all three of those, we generally say start in the bottom first, or ground up. So you'd start in that L1 or L2 where we're working the lower leg, then you'd work up to the C1, or if you have an asymmetric shift, and then U1. But on the flip side, if your primary problem is shoulder and or neck pain, headaches, then you certainly can start in the U1. But the best part is to do it the whole thing, because we've got to work that chain. So here's effectively what we end up with. Again, a lot of you had U1. So what U1 means here, I'm going to look at the anterior model, is that you had a lot of pull forward. So your shoulder was getting pulled forward on both sides, which means you have a really tight pec. Again, you see this arc, and you see the striations in the pec. It's pulling you forward. It's rounding your shoulders. Now I'm exaggerating it here in the webcam, but that's really what we have. We have those shoulders pulling forward, and with it comes the head. The head will duck and come forward because all that line of pull is pulling anteriorly here. And so that's where we end up with a lot of tension in the neck. So as it pulls forward, it puts a lot of tension, okay, on the trap. And that's where we feel that neck pain. That's where it's hurting up here. It spasms, you get those trigger points. Well, when that shoulder pulls forward, the lat doesn't want the shoulder to continue to pull forward because it's not going to be able to do a lot of the movement that it wants to get out of the shoulder. So what the lat is going to do is it's also going to spasm down, and it's going to pull tight. So here's my latissimus dorsi right here, the lat. It's going to pull that shoulder and lock it up, and it's going to stay tight, because if it's real loose, that shoulder's going to want to continue to come forward. So what you're going to notice in our exercise, we do a lot of things. We're loosening the pec and we're loosening the lat. And then again, we're working on that trigger point in the trap right here, because we're trying to get that shoulder to allow it to come back. But here's what I want to demonstrate. If we don't work on that, if we don't loosen that the trap up here, and we don't loosen that lat, you get a lot of tension in the low back. That thick thoracolumbar fascia right here, this thick gristle, puts a lot of tension on your low back, and that in turn works through the hip right here. And again, you can see this on the model over here in gray, but it actually comes, that deep hip flexor comes through the low back. Now it would be behind my belly button here, so I'm thinking about that being on my spine, so that actually be right here on this model, and it comes through and in here to the hip. And then again, see where this line goes? Right through here. Okay, what we're going to have is our hip flexors, our deep hip flexors, are going to be really tight, which in turn is going to take this hip and it's going to make it angle downwards. And this is where we end up with that situation where our tail end will kind of wants to come out, and then our belly wants to bulge here. It's that belly booty syndrome, where the belly comes out and the booty sticks out. And this happens a lot as you start to gain weight, as you get bigger. If the stomach starts to protrude more, you're going to get that, and then you have those tight hip flexors, you're going to start to see that anterior hip fall. We're going to get that quad tightness, we're going to get that low back tightness, we're going to get that lat tightness, the head's going to come forward, the shoulders are going to come forward, and then again that may transfer down the chain with tightness in the lateral leg, and then in the gastroc and in the foot. So hopefully that kind of illustrates how this kinetic chain works. And again, here's the fascia, here's the muscle, okay, the red stuff here, that's the muscle, and there's the fascia, and how it all coordinates and works together, and how one dysfunction in one area in the foot over time can work its way all the way up the chain. That is the kinetic chain, and that is what we're working with, and that's what makes the ATF so special, is because the Academy to Function knows how those systems work together, and we're going to work to make you more functional. We're going to start with that mobility, then we'll work to the stability or motor control, then to strength, and then again to that dynamic or that functional movement. So at the end of your day, what we need you to do is we really need you to get those work boots off as much as possible. Obviously not in the workplace, but when you get home, get the boots off. Really focus on lengthening that calf, or lengthening the gastroc and the soleus, because that's going to transfer those forces up the chain. So we're going to keep working on that. Really focus on your stretches and using that stick and ball to hit those trigger points. Again, holding each one of those for about 30 seconds and starting to get that blood flow back into those areas. Again, improving lymphatic flow, getting the bad stuff out, so we can start getting those tissues healthy and getting them more elastic, so that we can accomplish the mobility things that we need to. So we're really excited to have you on board with the Academy to Function. This is going to be a great pilot project. Again, we're really looking forward to this process. And remember that the Academy to Function is here to help you function better in your world.